Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome back to the DEX Show. It's my great pleasure to welcome Tim Flower back where he belongs, in the driver's seat with me. How you doing, Tim? It feels like it's been ages since we recorded.
It's been a while, yeah. Took a little time off, a little time in a motorcycle seat, but glad to be back.
Love to hear it. And we have an absolutely fantastic guest to help welcome Tim back, if you will. She's Alexandra Levit. She's a CEO of Inspiration at Work. She's a nationally syndicated columnist for the likes of the Wall Street Journal, and she's authored several books, the most recent of which is Deep Talent: How to Transform Your Organization and Empower Your Employees through AI. One of the books you've written, one of the things you've written, Alexandra, which caught our eye and made us want to invite you onto the show. We're delighted to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to have the opportunity to chat with you both.
Great pleasure. And maybe just introduce, I give you a little introduction, but anything you would add for the audience, Alexandra, to fill out that portrait a little?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm sometimes called a workforce futurist. And when people hear the term futurist, they tend to be a little perplexed. What does that actually mean? It sounds like something out of science fiction, something you made up. And I would just like to clarify right at the start that a futurist is just someone who looks at signs and signals that are percolating up through the larger market, through a specific segment, through society in general, and tries to make an educated guess about what has the greatest potential for disruption. And in doing that, like 5 or 10 years out, hopefully you can be in a position to be better prepared for the outcomes that are most likely. So it's not a crystal ball. It's not even necessarily prediction. We call our educated guesses forecasts. And it's fun to see how you do over time. I think the only way to know if you're a good futurist is to wait a couple of decades.
That is funny. You did make it sound a bit like an astrologer when you were laying it out.
Or Nostradamus. She's an IT Nostradamus.
Yes.
Well, the difference is that the information that I get isn't from things like the stars. I mean, it's from media coverage that's already out there. It's research that's already been done. So much to the extent that
important qualifier there. Yeah, we're not reading the tea leaves over here. It's
right.
Real world indications.
If you're willing to look to do a really deep dive and look at what's happening around you and the trajectory of those developments. I think it's something that it just takes a little bit of practice, but really anyone who's schooled in a particular discipline can do it.
Love it. And I mean, I think this is, we have been, I think I'm starting to get worried, Tim, but our audience is becoming a little bored of AI. We have been obsessed with it. Everybody's obsessed with it. And everybody's simultaneously a little bit bored about it, like, because it's so ubiquitous at the moment as a topic. But I think what you've managed to do, Alexandra, is really hone in on something that touches us all quite personally and directly, which relates to anxiety about the future of AI, the future of the workplace, the future of all of our careers. So maybe set the scene for us to begin with. For all the sort of intense discussion and interest around AI, what do you think is effectively being overlooked in terms of how we expect it to impact work and careers?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think there is a lot of hype. A couple of years ago, we saw a similar phenomena with the metaverse, where everybody was talking about it, generally speaking, as more of a philosophical question, but no one was being ultra specific on how they're going to get to point A and point B. And then the metaverse was rather summarily dismissed as a topic of interest, which I find very interesting because
it was, yes, yeah.
At all. I think it's just a matter of time before that is the majority of where we're going to be doing our work. So that's an example of where I think generative AI is right now. It's very much in the hype cycle, and you have a lot of anxiety around, we needed to do Gen AI pilots yesterday. We need to be incorporating AI into every piece of operations within our business. And the truth is what we're really lacking are very clear use cases where a particular problem is solved and the output using an AI partner is better, it's more strategic than what we would have done without that partner, that we have mastered in at least that particular process, how to have proper human oversight so that the tool does not run amok. We're able to derive reputable and valid insights from data. I think that these are all challenges that most organizations that are talking about generative AI aren't quite at the stage where they are doing it extremely well and in a way that can be repeatable into other processes. So that's the one thing that I would say. I mean, just talking about it isn't going to like transform your business. So there's two things, right? You want to look for ways to make it very tangible, which will, in my opinion, involve small pilots throughout the organization and a lot of experimentation. But you also want to not get too worried about being behind, because I think this is the kind of thing it's better to do slow. It's better to do it sensibly and do it right than to just kind of jump on the bandwagon. And the other thing I'd say about AI and the hype is that generative AI in particular isn't, and large language models aren't necessarily the huge leap that I think people think that they are. I mean, really, it's just a logical progression of how smarter technologies have been getting over the last couple of decades. But until we have something like artificial general intelligence, where these algorithms can then start making independent decisions and changing things without input from a person or a data set, that's when I think, really are going to see a transformation within society. But we're not there yet. So we still have to put a lot of guardrails around this stuff and make sure that that it's being used for the business purpose for which it's intended, and we don't allow it to run amok.
I mean, this takes us pretty near some of your ideas in deep talent, and I wonder if we could relate them together to specifically to technology workers. How have you seen traditional tech roles evolve in the past decade? And in the light of these changes, what new skills do you see as becoming increasingly important?
This is one of my favorite questions, because actually
Great.
it was about 10 years ago that I started talking about tech workers specifically. And what I thought was fairly obvious, I mean, maybe that isn't true for everyone, but I thought it was fairly obvious that things were going to shift fundamentally in the technology world when you have a population that has been highly employable, highly marketable, highly sought after for decades, that has basically been able to like rest on their laurels and get a certain number of certifications, know a certain number of programs, and they were going to be good to go. They could command anything they wanted, really, in the work world when it comes to employment. And it became pretty obvious to me early on, as I said, that at some point they're going to be the first ones to be automated because those are some of the tasks that are most natural to give over to machines, is like the creation and management of machine partners. And I worried a little bit about tech workers because I thought, are they not keeping their human skills up to par while they're resting on their hard technical skills? And when I say human skills, I'm referring to things like intuition, empathy, judgment, problem solving, creativity. I mean, these are things that a lot of IT folks haven't had to develop. It's not that they don't have them or they're not interested in having them. It's just that hasn't been the focus. And now you start to see that they're first on the front lines to be automated. And you start to ask yourself, okay, well, what else can they do? How can they add value to these roles in the realm of oversight? We talked about that. I mean, I'm very fond of using this expression, whenever you insert a machine into a traditionally human-driven process, you still need a person to design it. You need a person to oversee it. You need a person to fix it when it's broken, figure out how to redeploy it, and then communicate its insights to business leaders. That's a lot of jobs that IT people who were previously just programmers could take over and step up into the light and take those roles. So that's the long answer to that. Short answer is the roles are evolving to be much more well-rounded, and IT folks can absolutely have the opportunity to be gainfully employed as long as they want, if they're willing to take on some of these additional skill sets that perhaps were not as necessary for them in the past.
So, Alexandra, let's explore that a little bit. Having managed quite a few diverse teams myself, one of the most difficult things is guiding people, especially technology people, through change. And it can be hard enough when change is evolutionary, But I want to explore a little bit when the change feels revolutionary, right? Right now, we're in such a place of what feels like big change. And I love the concept, your concept that you put out there of AI as an ally, not a replacement,
Right.
right? We can get away a little bit from the scary place of everyone's losing their jobs
Mhm.
and look at it as an ally. I saw a great Gartner keynote, and the speaker really reinforced in authorship and music creation and the creativity part, you're not going to get rid of the human element of that, but we're fine with a human collaborator, a human editor. We need to get used to having a digital collaborator and a digital editor. And I think that's a real important distinction. But my sense is that employees, especially IT employees, are going to struggle with this a bit. So talk about a bit about some effective strategies for upskilling and reskilling to boost those capabilities, because it's more than just sending them to a tech course, right? They have to change how they think.
Right. I mean, there's kind of two things going on there. First of all, you have the general population that needs to develop greater IT skills because you have all of a sudden regular individual contributors from a variety of functions being empowered by AI based technologies to make decisions that would previously have had to be routed all the way through the organization. Now you have people who can work with technology in order to do their jobs, and in some cases beyond their jobs, more efficiently and effectively. And I actually call those applied technology skills. So you're a marketing person and you know that you can use software X in order to derive some key analytics about your campaigns. That's an example of applied technology skills. You know what tech is out there to allow you to do your jobs better. So that you have that on the one side. And then you have the IT folks that need to learn to do their jobs a little bit differently. And so I think a really comprehensive, robust learning program that is offered in a variety of different formats. Some may be video based, some might be short form, written, or in person courses. It can really be offered kind of across the gamut, but we need to do two things. We need to make sure everybody in our workforce has basic AI understanding and knowledge, at least as far as we have it in general in society. You need to be communicating that to your organization. And you also need to have a structure in place for making sure that your IT folks are really homing in on those human skills that are so important in order for them to add value in their jobs going forward. And by the way, this is especially important for the new generation of tech workers in Generation
Mm,
Z because of the research that we've done. Again, we don't want to stereotype and say everyone in Gen Z is the same, but there are trends that we see where these folks, a lot of them entered the workforce with no actual context for working remotely because they had never worked in general. So
right.
they're off doing these isolated things from home offices and have no idea how to build relationships or how to um, manage change management for
Yep.
the deploying of a new technology, as an example. Your tech folks who are entry level won't have learned that. And so we really have to take an extra step to make sure that the young tech workers, the members of Generation Z, are getting those kind of fundamentals, the basics down so that they're able to kind of lead. And another thing that I'm seeing, by the way, this isn't exactly what you asked, but I'm seeing a lot of fear
Mm,
among IT leaders right now because they feel like this is getting a little bit out of control. That all of a sudden you have different areas of the business being like, I'm going to build this AI and I'm going to do
right.
this and I'm going to do that. And they worry about privacy, security, their ability to have reliable and valid data from all these different systems that are collecting data in different ways. So I think that stress management is another area that is not always talked about with tech workers, but their jobs are a lot more complicated than they used to be. I mean, they used to have complete jurisdiction over everything,
Yep.
and those days are quickly finding themselves in the past.
No, that's an interesting point. Shadow IT just got incrementally more complicated as different segments of the business go off and do their own thing because it's so
Mhm.
easy. It's definitely an area to explore. But I think it's it's more than just upskilling. You're touching on a little bit of that now.
Mhm.
And we're at an interesting parallel right now because Nextthink just released our product called Adopt, which helps employees and IT release new products and helps employees adopt those. So it's more than just for employees, it's more than just getting the skill. They have to
Mhm.
actually adopt those skills into their role and
Right.
then adapt into their evolving role. And it's more than just the employee. How can companies support their IT teams on that journey?
I mean, I think being very proactive is important. There's always these in the research that I do, I constantly see this tension between employers and employees regarding whose responsibility is it to make sure you have the right learning for your job. Employers would like to say it's the employee's responsibility,
Yeah.
especially with the democratization of a lot of content now. You can kind of go onto MIT and take a course in data analytics if you want. Like there's no barrier to doing those things. So companies would like to have employees taking more of the onus on themselves, and employees feel the opposite. They're like, if I'm working for your company, you should be telling me what I need to do in order
Right.
to upskill and do my job more effectively. And so if you're a company, you're the one whose reputation is on the line. So I think that taking the responsibility for making sure your employees are learning what they need to learn and doing things the right way um, is very important. And that's for tech workers and non-tech workers. I mean, just the way, one of the things that's all the rage now is we're going to have an AI academy. We're going to train everyone in the basics of AI, which, as I said, is necessary. But again, you need to have that component of the tech workers may already come to the table knowing a lot about AI and things like that. But what don't they know is how to adapt their roles to work with these smart technologies so that they're not rendered completely obsolete. And that I think is not, I do not see that happening very much. I think that is a massive need that will save, I think, not only save a lot of tech workers' jobs, but save a lot of organizational reputations. Because what I see happening is that these technologies are going to be deployed, they're not going to have proper oversight. There's going to
Hmm.
be a big boo boo that's made, and all of a sudden, everyone will be pointing the fingers at each other. But really, the IT stewards had been there in a proper oversight role, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. So I think the role of IT workers has never been more important, and it's only going to get more strategic and more important as these technologies grow more sophisticated.
So when I was in enterprise IT, a large financial services company, the headline for the learning plan was, "If it is to be, it's up to me."
Mm.
And it worked for some people, but others, it didn't go over too well. You really need that balance, the company supporting you on that journey. So let's talk a bit about kind of digital employee experience
Mm-hmm.
specifically. What are some examples of how organizations are successfully implementing those upskilling programs? We really need to boost the digital employee experience, but how are organizations executing?
Yeah, having that digital employee experience, I think, makes all the difference between whether you're able to have a successful hybrid or remote workforce and whether you aren't, because that's really people's lifeline into the organizational culture. If they're not being uh, immersed in it on a daily basis in a physical
Mhm.
office, then that digital employee experience becomes very, very important. And I think that we had done kind of a good job, many organizations, of creating these experiences that were also tied to your point, to learning management systems. So you would go into your portal, you would get all of the information relevant to your current job, what's going on in the organization this week, but then you would also have kind of a customized learning platform where that hopefully would be at this point infused with AI based technologies that would tell you, okay, based on what you took last month, you might take this. Based on the fact that you want to get into this career path or make this lateral move, you might take this class. Hopefully, a lot of them are infused with that technology at this point. But having people given specific guidance and then the option to kind of consume that learning when and where is convenient for them, I think is a really important point there. And the other thing I would say about digital employee experience is I've been beaten on this drum for probably a couple of decades now, but I noticed that the digital employee experience tends to be kind of a one size fits all thing. And it's very much in many cases not customized to the needs of a particular group. And I'll give you an example, and that's the contract workforce. I've been a contractor working with different companies for over 20 years. And in many of those cases, I was client facing. So I was actually engaging with customers on behalf of that organization, and I never received any onboarding, any digital employee experience, anything. I was on my own to represent this organization. They wouldn't let full-time employees do that, so I'm not sure why contractors aren't considered a valuable enough audience to warrant their own digital experience. And that's, by the way, employee experience in general, not just digital experience, but I think digital experience is what we tend to be creating now. And so especially because it's technology driven. That should make it a little bit easier theoretically. I really am encouraging organizations to think about all the different stakeholder groups that are working on behalf of your organization, and to make sure that you have provided the right kind of experience for them.
And I think you're right. AI plays a big role there, or can play a big role. And once employees see the power, I think it's really enlightening. I follow a Chat GPT prompt social account, and they come out with some really fascinating ways to leverage it. And just yesterday was a series of prompts to put together a learning plan for me. Use Chat GPT to create a robust learning plan with practice examples and details on how I can learn XYZ. And it comes back with huge examples and huge plans on how to upskill yourself. I think it's using AI to help you upskill in that area. I think is a really cool concept.
And that was a beautiful example of applied technology skills, by the way.
Mm.
I loved that you said that, because the fact that you knew that you could use information about how to develop prompts and Chat GPT to accomplish this goal of learning management plan, just even knowing that you can do that is a skill
Mm.
set. Because most people would either still hire a consultant, okay, I need a learning consultant, or they would do research in a more traditional way, when this is in many ways a fast track. It's a fast pass if you're going to Disney.
Yeah.
But again, you need to know how to prompt it, and that's a skill set that I think pretty much everyone has to learn, unless you develop the Chat GPT in the first place. Then you might know how to prompt it. So that's some of our IT workers, but 95% of people don't know how to prompt generative AI. So we need to all learn that. It's a great example.
Listening to you, Alexandra, I can't help but think, on the one hand, we have technology workers who are, by necessity, having to develop their extra technological skill set, right? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have traditional non-technology workers who are increasingly enmeshed in technology and whatever it is that we do. I mean, what is if both sets of workers are kind of pulling together into the same kind of middle ground, how would you define that middle ground? What is the nature of human work as it relates to technology at large, in your view?
Well, I think it'll be increasingly combined and not as separate. And as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, you had typically the IT department would make all the IT decisions. And we're just seeing this type of technology, and I'm referring to generative AI in particular, being far more democratized, where there's just no reason to keep it centralized in a given function. Everybody can learn to use it relatively intuitively, kind of like how everybody used the internet. Well, generative AI tools are going to be the same sort of thing. So as to whether there will be a role for the IT function, I mean, again, I think like other functions, it's becoming more strategic and less hands-on, actually writing the code yourself, or building analytic systems or databases. I mean, that stuff is going to be more and more automated, and it's going to be the larger strategy of how do we deploy these technologies in a way that makes the most sense for the organization. And that's where I just see a lot of wheels spinning now. Organizations are like, we have to get on the Gen AI bandwagon. We got to have an AI program, an AI project. And it's like, take a giant step back and think about whether you have the basics and the fundamentals down. Culture is a great example. Like, you got to build culture from the inside out. You can't use an AI to improve your culture. You got to get it right by asking employees and really taking the step to co-create new norms in this post-pandemic era. But that's an example of just where we just think we're going to snap our fingers and Gen AI is going to solve all our problems. And so that attitude and that skill set of being able to guide the implementation on kind of this practical, real world level is really where I can see IT leaders and IT professionals stepping into the light there, because they're going to know better than anyone how this stuff can be deployed and what it's used for, and also what's practical for your particular organization, which will be different than another organization.
Can't be denied, Alexandra. You've been pretty prescient in what you've been writing and thinking about. I'm sure you've noticed more than anybody over the last few years.
Can't win them all, but
you are a futurist after all. I mean, you know, it must be how you earn your futurist card. But would love to know thereby, what are you working on presently? Do you have a new book that you're considering? What should we be aware of around the corner that we're not thinking of right now?
So one of the things that I did in 2020, right when the pandemic was getting going, was I provided a forecast to the U.S. Department of Labor about what I thought would be some of the major fallout points from, at that point, we didn't really know how long COVID was going to go on. We didn't know what kind of disruption it would be necessarily, but I thought that inevitably there would be economic contractions as a result of this, and probably a mental health escalation globally, because we were going to all be in survival mode for as long as this took, and then everyone would have suffered a collective trauma. So the forecast was based on that, and the fact that what were we going to see happening in terms of unemployment, and what could we do with people who found themselves unemployed and suffering from mental health difficulties in this, we were looking at 2024, 2025. And in the end, we received a grant from the National Institutes of Health here in the US, and they gave us research funds to develop an intervention to help people who are newly unemployed with their symptoms of emotional distress from being laid off. And our hope is to kind of, just like generative AI is being democratized, we would like to democratize evidence-based mental health care to just your average worker, not somebody who needs to have the money for an expensive therapist to go see. And so that's what I've been working on. The most exciting thing is the data from this clinical trial, because we ran it against a control group that just got garden variety career advice. We wanted to see, like, is this incorporation of mental health care really going to be something that's valuable? And so we did like a scientific study on this, and we're going to have the data in the next couple of months, and that'll inform what we do with the intervention next. But the reason I bring this up is that I think when people, going very back full circle to the beginning, we talk about what a futurist does. I think in an ideal world, a futurist uses forecasting to actually develop solutions that can help with problems that are coming around the pike, and we do see, unfortunately, some of those forecasts coming to fruition around unemployment, layoffs, and escalating mental health crises. So it's only good to be right if you can do something about it. And this is an example of something that we were able to do.
Well said. Beautiful project. Alexandra, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Absolutely fascinating to talk to you.
You guys asked great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you very much. And where can people find you? Where can people learn about you? Any obviously, we've already mentioned your latest book. Anything else you'd like to plug? Anywhere else you'd like our listeners to go?
Well, I would love people to check out the website, alexandralevit.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm still on X to a certain degree. So I would love to hear people's thoughts, especially because many of my books are getting updated regularly. So if there's something that you think I missed or something that you think we should have considered, then I'm always delighted to receive that feedback, and also to hear your forecast about what you think is coming around the pike in your industry, because it's rare that I get to do a deep dive into a particular industry. And so I love hearing it from the perspective of people who are in the trenches.
Fabulous. Alexandra, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.